Now let's move to the next question. Question 21. Which of the following characteristics of She Stoops to Conquer is not correct? 1. It is endowed with an ingenious and lively plot. 2. It does not cast excellent characters. 3. It has a vivacious and delightful style. 4. It lacks the restoration grossness. Here's the answer. 2. It does not cast excellent characters. Let's have a look at the explanations. The incorrect statement is that it does not cast excellent characters. Contrary to this, the play features well-crafted, excellent characters that contribute richly to its lively and engaging plot. Ingenious and lively plot. This play is packed with clever twists and turns. The story uses contrasts and mix-ups, like mistaken identities, to keep things super engaging and funny. For instance, Marlowe mistakes Mr. Hardcastle's house for an inn, and hilariously demands service from him, thinking he's the innkeeper. This mix-up not only sets up a bunch of comedic situations, but also moves the plot along in a fun and intriguing way. For the UGC NET English exam, understanding how these elements contribute to the plot's liveliness and complexity is crucial. Excellent characters. Correction needed. Actually, the characters are awesome. Characters like Marlowe and Kate have lots of layers, showing different sides of themselves as the play unfolds. They really dig into themes like class differences and what's on the surface versus what's real. Kate, for example, pretends to be a maid to get closer to Marlowe, showing off her smarts and flexibility. This move of hers is super strategic and shows just how complex she is. Tony Lumpkin stirs the pot with his tricks, adding to the fun and depth of the story. In the UGC NET English exam, appreciating the depth and function of each character, especially someone like Kate, is key. Vivacious and delightful style. The play's style is all about witty banter, funny scenarios, and clever tricks that create a lively and enjoyable mood. Scenes like Kate messing with Marlowe or the funny back and forths between Mrs. Hardcastle and her husband are what make the style so dynamic and fun. Avoids restoration grossness. The play tackles themes of class and social norms without diving into the raunchy content typical of restoration comedy. Instead, it opts for more subtle humor. For example, Marlowe's shyness around upper-class women is explored in a way that's insightful but not crude. This approach lets the play critique social norms while keeping the humor classy. For the UGC NET English exam, noting how the play avoids grossness common in restoration comedy yet still critiques society is important. Now let's move to the next question. Question 22. Being a white man, in short, was a very concrete manner of being in the world, a way of taking hold of reality, language, and thought. What does the theorist signify by the term white man here? 1. A dominating man. 2. A megalomaniac. 3. A man with double consciousness. 4. A form of colonial authority. Here is the answer. 4. A form of colonial authority. Let's have a look at the explanations. The term white man in this context refers to a form of colonial authority, indicating a specific position of power and a particular way of engaging with the world rooted in colonial history. The theorist talks about the term white man as more than just a description of someone's race or looks. It's really about the type of power and control this identity has historically held due to colonialism. This isn't just about being physically white. It's about holding a certain position of power and interacting with the world in a specific way. The white man here symbolizes the kind of control over what's real, what we say, and how we think, all shaped to keep up and justify colonial rule. For the UGC NET English exam, it's essential to understand that this term isn't just a label, but represents a broader social, political, and cultural force stemming from colonial times. The idea is that being a white man meant you were part of and perpetuating the powerful ideologies of colonialism, which affected not just those being colonized, but also the entire structure and hierarchy of societies worldwide. Now let's move to the next question. Question 23. Did not Shakespeare hate and despise Iago and Edmund? Identify the book in which this question has been mentioned. 1. An Apology for Poetry. 2. Kings of Norway. 3. Fool of Quality. 4. Aspects of Poetry. Here is the answer. 4. Aspects of Poetry. Let's have a look at the explanations. This question is found in Aspects of Poetry by John Campbell Sharp, which discusses Shakespeare's characterizations and his possible personal sentiments towards his creations, like Iago and Edmund. John Campbell Sharp really makes you think with his question in Aspects of Poetry. Did Shakespeare actually hate characters like Iago from Othello and Edmund from King Lear? He's diving deep into Shakespeare's feelings about his own characters, especially the bad guys. Sharp's asking us to look at how Shakespeare might have felt about creating such villains. Were they just characters, or did he despise them for their evil ways? It's a cool way to explore Shakespeare's emotional and ethical connection to his creations, and opens up a bigger conversation about the nature of evil in literature. For the UGC NET English exam, understanding this aspect of character analysis and authorial intent can be really crucial. Now, Thomas Reimer was pretty harsh on Othello back in the late 17th century. His book, A Short View of Tragedy, from 1693, criticizes the play for not sticking to the rules, like everything happening in one day and one place, which was the style back then. He also didn't like how Othello, a man of color, was a general, or his marriage to Desdemona, a white senator's daughter. He thought these things just didn't fit the social or natural norms of his time. Despite all this, Reimer did give Shakespeare props for the beautiful language Othello uses to woo Desdemona, even though he wasn't a fan of the relationship itself. He also thought the whole plot and the characters were a bit unbelievable. Knowing about Reimer's critique is important for the UGC NET English exam because it shows how perceptions of characters and themes can reflect the societal attitudes of the time and influence literary analysis. August Wilhelm Schlegel had some pretty old-school views on Shakespeare's Othello. He thought Othello's tragic downfall was just him reverting to his supposed barbaric nature because of his Moorish background. Schlegel linked Othello's violent jealousy to what he called wild nature, and connected it to the hot climate of Othello's origins, which he thought brought out the worst in people, like being super jealous in a way that isn't even deep, but just basic and sensual. He also threw in some really dated stereotypes about Moorish customs, like the treatment of women, suggesting that all of this pointed to a kind of savagery. This interpretation is a classic example of how 19th century critics sometimes used racial biases to understand characters, aligning European identity with civility and morality, while painting other identities as savage. For the UGC NET English exam, it's essential to recognize how such historical biases in literary criticism can influence interpretations and the portrayal of characters. On the other hand, Samuel Johnson, who was around in the 1700s, was a big fan of Othello and defended its depiction of human nature. He really liked how the play showed the different sides of human behavior through characters like Othello's honest and gullible nature, Iago's sneaky evilness, and Desdemona's naive innocence. Johnson thought these traits were proof of Shakespeare's genius at capturing what people are really like, hinting that you'd be hard-pressed to find a modern writer who could match Shakespeare. In the UGC NET English exam, understanding Johnson's defense of the play's depiction of human traits as an affirmation of Shakespeare's insight into human nature is crucial. Samuel Taylor Coleridge had a different take on Othello. He saw him not just as some jealous guy, but as someone acting out of hurt pride and moral outrage, which makes Othello seem like a noble, high-minded, Moorish leader. Coleridge thought Iago was basically emotionless, just all cold calculation, and he came up with the term motive hunting of motiveless malignity to explain Iago's evil deeds, suggesting Iago was evil just for the sake of being evil. Anna Jameson, on the other hand, zoomed in on Desdemona, pointing out how her kindness and pure heart not only make her likable, but also tragically bring her down. Jameson frames the main showdown in Othello as good versus evil, Desdemona's goodness against Iago's wickedness, rather than focusing on the couple's marriage issues. For the UGC NET English exam, understanding these interpretations helps highlight how character analysis can drive the thematic understanding of the play. A.C. Bradley throws another layer into the mix by describing Othello as Shakespeare's most gut-wrenchingly intense tragedy. He gets why it pulls so hard at our emotions with its mix of pity, fear, and even disgust at what unfolds. Bradley kind of puts Othello on a pedestal, seeing him as a grand, tragic figure whose downfall comes because Iago played him by twisting his virtues against him. Desdemona, in his view, is almost too good. her pure, saintly nature, which Bradley refers to as embodying the eternal womanly, plays into her tragic end, highlighting the play's theme of great hopes doomed to fail. He also notes how uniquely the play is structured, with the drama kicking in late but then rushing headlong into disaster, making us all the more emotionally invested. Bradley's approach is to treat the characters like real people, giving us a deeper look into human nature and tragedy. For the UGC NET English exam, Bradley's insights into the emotional and structural elements of the play are crucial for a comprehensive literary analysis. G. Wilson Knight wasn't a fan of A.C. Bradley's romantic take on Othello. He argued that the play is more about the vivid specifics than some broad, universal themes, and he really appreciated the formal beauty of the play's structure. L.C. Knights also took issue with Bradley, accusing him of treating Shakespeare's tragedies like they were just stories in a novel and totally missing their poetic essence. Knights pointed out that focusing too much on the psychological stuff ignores the important role of the language used in the play. For the UGC NET English exam, understanding the importance of poetic elements in Shakespeare's works is essential to appreciate the artistic complexity of his tragedies. F.R. Leavis thought Bradley was way too sentimental in his reading of Othello, accusing him of getting too caught up with Othello and missing how the character kind of loves himself a bit too much. Leavis sees Othello not as some tragically flawed hero, but more like a guy whose ego and self-deception spiral out of control. For the UGC NET English exam, it's crucial to analyze different critical perspectives, especially on character portrayal and themes. William Empson dug deep into the use of the word honest in Othello. He noticed how this word pops up a lot and how its meaning shifts depending on who's using it and when. Empson thinks Shakespeare was playing with this word to reflect a shift in society towards more individualistic attitudes. He argues that this choice of words is part of a bigger strategy to explore themes like deception and integrity, showing how language itself can shape the story. In the UGC NET English exam, examining how specific word choices in Shakespeare's plays contribute to thematic development is a key aspect of literary analysis. Now let's move to the next question. Question 24. The term gynocriticism refers to 1. Feminist consciousness, 2. Production of writings on women by men, 3. Analysis of androtexts, 4. Production and analysis of writings by women on women. Here is the answer. 4. Production and analysis of writings by women on women. Let's have a look at the explanations. Gynocriticism is a feminist critical framework that focuses on the writings by women about women, analyzing the female experience as depicted in literature. Elaine Showalter kicked off gynocriticism in the 70s to shake up how we look at women's lit. This approach was all about diving into women's experiences and the history behind women writers, moving past the usual dude-heavy literary critique. Gynocriticism was a game changer in feminist criticism, really zeroing in on the works, lives, and unique voices of women authors. It builds on the efforts of legends like Virginia Woolf and Simone de Beauvoir, who weren't shy about calling out how women were shown in books and who pushed for looking at lit through a feminist viewpoint. Gynocriticism took this to the next level by focusing specifically on women's writings and experiences, creating its own women's lit tradition. It's all about understanding the battles women face with identity and how society's gender roles get tossed into the mix. Elaine was big on digging into both how women writers are seen because of their gender and the personal vibes they bring to their writing. The goal, to uncover a women-only cultural vibe and suggest a new way to see femininity that doesn't just echo what men have laid out. By doing this, gynocriticism hoped to celebrate a distinct women's literary scene that wasn't just living under men's shadow. It also threw down against those old-school Freudian ideas that claimed women were naturally jealous of men. Gynocriticism clapped back, arguing that this so-called phallic prejudice really colors how women think and needs a closer look. This mindset has been key in spotlighting how biases against women have kind of hidden their literary contributions, making them echo men's styles too much. Gynocriticism has been crucial in bringing back forgotten female works and promoting feminist hits like The Madwoman in the Attic, really enriching the literary world by putting women's voices out there. For the UGC NET English exam, understanding the significance of gynocriticism can give you deep insights into feminist literary criticism, essential for analyzing gender dynamics in literature. Now let's move to the next question. Question 25, The Calcutta Chromosome, 1995, is a novel exploring past and future. It has been written by 1. Rabindranath Tagore, 2. Amitav Ghosh, 3. Raja Rao, 4. Mulkraj Anand. Here is the answer. 2. Amitav Ghosh. Let's have a look at the explanations. The Calcutta Chromosome is a novel by Amitav Ghosh that blends elements of mystery and science fiction, exploring themes of colonialism, medicine, and transcendent knowledge. The Calcutta Chromosome by Amitav Ghosh, which hit the shelves in 1995, is a wild mix of a medical thriller and a futuristic tale set between Calcutta and New York City. This cool story, fired up by Sir Ronald Ross's 1898 malaria research, bagged the Arthur C. Clarke Award in 1997. It kicks off with Antar, chilling in future New York, who bumps into info about El Murugan, a buddy who's gone missing after obsessing over Ross's discoveries. Digging through digital archives, Antar tries to piece together why Murugan vanished in 95 Calcutta, pulling us into a twisted plot that hops through time. Murugan's own sleuthing digs up a secret twist behind Ross's big science wins. A shadowy group using some wild mystical science stuff to swap chromosomes and snag immortality. Ghosh stitches historical scientific leaps with out-there fiction, dishing out a mystery packed with science and the chase for living forever. For those diving into the UGC NET English exam, grasping the blend of historical and speculative elements in Ghosh's novel is key. It showcases how modern writers remix historical facts with imaginative fiction, a vital angle for analyzing contemporary literature. Now let's move to the next question. Question 26. What does aptly define minor literature, according to Gilles Deleuze? 1. Deconstruction of material reality. 2. Deterritorialization of language. 3. Heteroglossia. 4. Metanarrative. Here is the answer. 2. Deterritorialization of language. Let's have a look at the explanations. According to Gilles Deleuze, minor literature involves the deterritorialization of language, where language is used in a way that subs and escapes dominant cultural narratives. Deterritorialization of language is a cool concept from Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, especially in their work Kafka Toward a Minor Literature. It's about knocking language, ideas, or entities out of their usual spots and letting them take on new meanings and roles. In terms of minor literature, it's all about using language to dodge or twist the big, dominant cultural and political norms. Deleuze and Guattari believe that minor literature can change and politicize language, opening up space for sideline voices to get heard in fresh and groundbreaking ways, really shaking up the usual order. This idea isn't just a side note, it's central and unique to understanding minor literature as Deleuze defines it, so it's not something covered by other literary or philosophical debates. Gilles Deleuze, a big-name French philosopher from the mid-20th century until his death in 1995, made waves with his thoughts that spanned from deep metaphysics to how we know what we know. He and psychoanalyst Félix Guattari teamed up for some influential texts like Anti-Oedipus and 1,000 Plateaus, which dig into how capitalism, mental illness, and society intersect. Deleuze wasn't just reading old philosophy books. He was actively engaging with ideas from thinkers like Spinoza, Nietzsche, and Bergson, and he's left a pretty big stamp across various academic fields. For the UGC NET English exam, knowing Deleuze's influence and the breadth of his work can help frame many modern philosophical and critical theories. Deleuze's take on epistemology, the study of knowledge, challenges the old-school ways of thinking, instead proposing a model that embraces the complexities and contradictions of how we understand and communicate. His book, The Logic of Sense, dives into how we construct meaning and truth, questioning the very foundations through the lens of language and metaphysics. At the heart of his philosophy is this deep dive into the nature of identity and difference, aiming to break free from traditional limits on space and time. His idea of the virtual is all about pure difference, lining up with his broader philosophical project to free up our thinking and open new paths for exploring and expressing ideas. This reevaluation is crucial in the UGC NET English exam for understanding the shifts in modern philosophical thought. Now let's move to the next question. Question 27. All writers since Chaucer have come from the middle class, have had good, at least expensive education. Where has Virginia Woolf explained it? 1. Mrs. Dalloway 2. To the Lighthouse. 3. The Leaning Tower. 4. A Room of One's Own. Here is the answer. 3. The Leaning Tower. Let's have a look at the explanations. This statement is from Virginia Woolf's essay, The Leaning Tower, where she discusses the socioeconomic backgrounds of English writers and their impact on literary output. The moment isn't just about the latest stuff from Virginia Woolf, but a collection that brings together essays that hadn't been gathered before, echoing the vibe and themes we see in the common reader. This mix includes everything from critiques on classics like The Faerie Queene to comments on writers like Scott and Lockhart, and even some of Woolf's less flowery essays. But what really makes this collection stand out are pieces like The Leaning Tower and The Artist and Politics, written during the last part of Woolf's life. These essays dig deep into how the wars touched her and influenced her writing, showing how the outside world started to seep into her thoughts more and more. Especially in The Leaning Tower, written in 1940, Woolf talks about how the literature scene was shaking up because of all the societal chaos. She points out how writers before World War I had it kind of cushy, enjoying peace and wealth that let them keep a bit of distance from the harsher realities, which isn't something writers could do anymore. Plus, she mentions that from Chaucer's time, most English writers came from the middle class and had a pretty decent education, but now those norms were being flipped on their head because of the times they were in. For the UGC NET English exam, it's key to grasp how Woolf reflects on historical changes in the socioeconomic backgrounds of writers and their impact on literary production. Understanding this continuity and its disruption offers insights into the evolution of literary themes and contexts. Here's a casual rundown of Virginia Woolf's major works, which you might find handy. Novels: The Voyage Out, 1915, her debut novel. Night and Day, 1919, a look at Victorian values. Jacob's Room, 1922, breaks traditional narrative for something more modern. Mrs. Dalloway, 1925, a day in the life, but way deeper. To the Lighthouse, 1927, family dynamics and philosophical introspection. Orlando, 1928, a romp through time with a gender-switching protagonist. The Waves, 1931, 6 inner monologues blending into a choir of voices. The Years, 1936, family saga meets historical narrative. Between the Acts, 1941, her last novel, symbolically wrapping up English literature pre-Woolwood II. Short stories. The Short Stories of Virginia Woolf, 1944, a posthumous collection of her brief but vibrant tales. The Mark on the Wall, 1917, minimal plot, profound thoughts. Kew Gardens, 1919, descriptive wanderings through the famous gardens. Cross-genre, Flush, 1933, a biography of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Cocker Spaniel, blurring fiction and nonfiction. Drama, Freshwater, 1935, a quirky play about Woolf's great-aunt, Victorian photographer Julia Margaret Cameron. Biography, Roger Fry, a biography, 1940, chronicles the life of the English artist and critic. Essays, Haworth, November 1904, early thoughts penned at the Brontes' home. A Room of One's Own, 1929, iconic feminist essay on women and fiction. Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Brown, 1924, Woolf's critique of British fiction. A Letter to a Young Poet, 1932, advice on literature and life. 3 Guineas, 1938, an argument against the patriarchy and war. Essay collections, The Moment and Other Essays, 1947, posthumous, includes lesser-known but poignant essays. The Captain's Deathbed and Other Essays, 1950, posthumous, a final roundup of her analytical prose. Selected Essays, 2009, modern compilation of her essayistic brilliance. The Greatest Essays of Virginia Woolf, 2017, the latest collection showcasing her top essays. For the UGC NET English exam, having a handle on these categories and knowing a bit about each can really help in crafting detailed responses, especially when discussing Woolf's themes, stylistic innovations, and contributions to literature and feminism. Understanding her range, from novels to essays, highlights her versatility and impact on 20th century literature. Now let's move to the next question. Question 28. Who among the following is not associated with cultural imperialism? 1. Jonathan Dollimore. 2. Alan Sinfield. 3. Raymond Williams. 4. Stanley Fish. Here is the answer. 4. Stanley Fish. Let's have a look at the explanations. Stanley Fish is known for his work in reader response criticism and legal interpretive theory, not cultural imperialism, which is more closely associated with theorists like Edward Said. Now let's move to the next question. Question 29. Cultural imperialism, or cultural colonialism, is basically when a country spreads its influence through culture, like language, traditions, politics, and economics, to create and keep up unequal social and economic relationships between different groups. It often uses wealth, media control, and sometimes even force to keep a cultural upper hand that supports imperialistic ways. This concept shows up in various forms, such as attitudes, official policies, or even military actions, all aiming to boost the cultural power of the imperial group. Studies on cultural imperialism cover a ton of academic fields, like communication, media studies, education, foreign policy, history, international relations, linguistics, literature, post-colonial studies, science, sociology, social theory, environmental studies, and sports, showing just how broad its impact is. It's important to distinguish cultural imperialism from cultural diffusion, which is just the natural spreading of culture. While cultural globalization is about cultures spreading worldwide, cultural imperialism has a specific power dynamic where one culture forces itself on others. Cultural materialism, kicked off by Raymond Williams and expanded by Jonathan Dollimore and Alan Sinfield, is a Marxist twist on new historicism. It critically looks at historical material through a politicized lens in a bold way. For the UGC NET English exam, understanding cultural materialism is crucial because it calls for examining historical contexts and elements often ignored or left out by mainstream history. This approach uses a mix of theories, especially from Marxist and feminist angles, to do deep dives into texts and critique the usual ways of studying big-time classic texts, pushing for a politically savvy way to understand texts and their historical backdrops. Jonathan G. Dollimore, born in 1948, is a British philosopher and critic who dives deep into Renaissance literature, especially drama, and explores topics like gender studies, queer theory, the history of ideas, death studies, decadence, and cultural theory. He's written 4 scholarly books, a memoir, and loads of academic papers. Together with Alan Sinfield, he co-edited The Game-Changing Political Shakespeare and was at the forefront of developing cultural materialism, significantly impacting discussions around sexuality, desire, Renaissance culture, art, censorship, and cultural theory. For the UGC NET English exam, it's important to understand Dollimore's influence in cultural materialism and his critical approaches that redefine traditional literary studies. Alan Sinfield, December 17, 1941, December 2nd, 2017, was an influential English theorist who left his mark across various fields like Shakespeare, sexuality, modern theater, gender studies, queer theory, and post-1945 political and cultural theory. He was a professor at the University of Sussex and wrote 12 books, playing a key role in bringing queer studies into academic conversations. His book, Literature, Politics, and Culture in Post-War Britain, first published in 1989, takes a revolutionary socialist perspective on the cultural dynamics of post-war Britain, shaking up traditional views. For the UGC NET English exam, knowing about Sinfield's contributions helps in exploring how literary and cultural studies address broader social and political contexts, especially in post-war Britain. Raymond Henry Williams, born on August 31st, 1921, in Wales and passing away in 1988, was a big deal in academic circles, especially known for stirring up the New Left and wider cultural talks. He dived into politics, culture, mass media, and literature, giving the Marxist critique of culture and arts a solid base. He was pretty popular, with around 750,000 of his works, including translations, sold in the UK alone. Williams is famous for kicking off cultural studies and cultural materialism, where he mixed leftist culturalism with Marxist analysis to dig into culture as a productive process. Cultural materialism popped up in the early 1980s and became a major player in literary theory and cultural studies, kind of like the American New Historicism that looks at early modern literature. For the UGC NET English exam, understanding cultural materialism is vital because it's not just about history, it's about how history influences and shapes culture. Williams coined this approach, blending leftist views with Marxist critique to closely examine historical documents and really get the gist of different historical periods. It takes the usual Marxist class analysis up a notch by including a broader look at marginalized groups, pulling ideas from big names like Herbert Marcuse and Antonio Gramsci. This approach highlights the residual, emergent, and oppositional cultural aspects in society, shedding light on the overlooked or emerging parts of culture that push against the mainstream. Stanley Fish, born on April 19, 1938, in Providence, Rhode Island, is a big name in American literary criticism. He's known for diving deep into reader response criticism, neo-pragmatism, and exploring how literature and law intersect in their interpretations. His academic road started at the University of Pennsylvania, where he snagged his BA in 1959 before heading over to Yale University to pick up his MA in 1960 and his PhD in 1962. Fish has made his mark across some pretty top-tier universities, including the University of California at Berkeley, Johns Hopkins University, Duke University, the University of Illinois at Chicago, and Florida International University in Miami. For the UGC NET English exam, understanding Stanley Fish's contributions is crucial, especially his approaches in reader response criticism and how it emphasizes the reader's role in interpreting texts. His work offers valuable insights into the dynamics of text interpretation, making it a key point of study for those exploring contemporary literary theory. Name the author-writer who is not associated with British cultural studies. 1. I.A. Richards. 2. Richard Hoggart. 3. Raymond Williams. 4. Stuart Hall. Here is the answer. 1. I.A. Richards. Let's have a look at the explanations. I.A. Richards, known for his contributions to literary criticism and rhetoric, was not directly involved in the development of British cultural studies, unlike the other listed figures. Back in 1964, the visionary duo Stuart Hall and Richard Hoggart set up the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, CCCS, at the University of Birmingham, and it quickly became a game changer in the world of cultural studies. For nearly 40 years, up until 2002, this place was buzzing with innovative ideas, playing a huge role in shaping what cultural studies became. This center, often celebrated as the Birmingham School of Cultural Studies, really turned into a melting pot for British cultural studies under the leadership of big names like Richard Hoggart, Stuart Hall, and later Richard Johnson. They were all about pushing the envelope and expanding the horizons of cultural research. The CCCS was famous for mixing things up by incorporating ideas from feminism, Marxism, structuralism, and post-structuralism, setting new standards in how cultural analysis was done. Their pioneering work covered a lot, from subcultures and how media shapes audiences to exploring the crossroads of race, politics, and gender, making a lasting impact on the field. Some of their big hits, like Off-Center Feminism and Cultural Studies and Policing the Crisis, really show the depth of their influence on cultural discussions. The CCCS wasn't just about studying, it was a breeding ground for some of the sharpest minds, including Stuart Hall, who came up with the encoding-decoding model of communication right there, alongside groundbreaking research like the Nationwide Project by David Morley and Charlotte Brunsden. Raymond Henry Williams, another titan of thought, born on August 31, 1921, and passing on January 26, 1988, left a huge mark with his Marxist takes on everything from politics to literature. Selling around 750,000 copies of his books in the UK and reaching global audiences through translations, Williams was crucial in founding cultural studies and cultural materialism. For the UGC NET English exam, understanding the contributions of figures like Williams to cultural studies and cultural materialism is key, as they provide a critical framework for analyzing various cultural phenomena. Ivor Armstrong Richards, born on February 26, 1893, and passing away on September 7, 1979, was a trailblazing English educator, literary critic, and poet. He played a key role in kicking off the new criticism movement, which is all about diving deep into literary texts, especially poetry, to really get how they work as their own little aesthetic worlds. Richards had some game-changing ideas about how to analyze literature and how language shapes our thinking. These ideas are all over his major works, like The Meaning of Meaning, which he wrote with C.K. Ogden, as well as his other biggies, Principles of Literary Criticism, Practical Criticism, and The Philosophy of Rhetoric. For the UGC NET English exam, it's super important to understand Richards' influence on new criticism. His methods of analyzing texts by focusing on their form and language, instead of historical or biographical contexts, have shaped how modern literary criticism is approached, making his work a must-know for the exam. Now let's move to the next question. Question 30. Who among the following describe drama in the following words? A true play is three-dimensional. It is literature that walks and talks before our eyes. 1. Marjorie Bolton. 2. Allardyce Nicholl. 3. G.B. Shaw. 4. Arthur Miller. Here is the answer. 1. Marjorie Bolton. Let's have a look at the explanations. This description of drama as a living, three-dimensional form of literature was articulated by Marjorie Bolton, highlighting the dynamic and interactive nature of theatrical performances. Drama is all about stirring up conflict, action, and emotion, and it's meant to pop off the page when actors bring it to life on stage or on the big screen. M.H. Abrams points out that drama is really meant for the stage, with everything, from the words to the actions, scripted for actors to perform. The main stuff in drama includes characters, dialogue, setting, plot, and the action itself, all crafted to make a live audience feel something special. Marjorie Bolton nailed it when she described drama as literature that walks and talks before our eyes, showing how it's not just about reading, it's about experiencing in real time in 3 dimensions. Drama's got this unique way of messing with time, playing with events from yesterday, today, or tomorrow, but always in the now of the performance. For the UGC NET English exam, it's crucial to grasp how drama uses its elements, like time and space, in live settings, and how these influence our understanding of the text. Marjorie Bolton, who was born on May 7, 1924, and died on August 30, 2017, was a standout British author and poet who also knew her way around Esperanto. She's famous for her 1960 biography, Zamenhof, Creator of Esperanto, diving into the life of the language's creator, L.L. Zamenhof. Bolton really made a mark with her Anatomy series, tackling everything from poetry to prose and drama to language from 1953 to 1980. She kicked off her literary career with Preliminaries poems in 1949, got hooked on Esperanto the same year, and even wove it into her poetry and stories. Plus, she tackled practical language stuff in books like Saying What We Mean, 1959, Words in Real Life, 1965, and Reading in Real Life, 1971, and even translated Harivansh Rai Bachchan's Madhushala into English. Miller believes that drama should come naturally and really reflect what's happening in the world today. He thinks that while the language and visuals in a play are cool, they shouldn't be the only things that make a play worth watching. Instead, Miller's all about creating theater that digs into the real complexities of life, helping the audience get a deeper sense of their own lives in today's world, rather than just throwing simple emotional stories at them. For the UGC NET English exam, it's important to understand Miller's approach to playwriting, as it emphasizes the role of drama in reflecting and influencing societal understanding, moving beyond mere entertainment. Just like Miller, George Bernard Shaw used his plays to throw some serious shade on society's big issues, but with a sharp, funny twist. Identifying as a Fabian socialist, Shaw filled his plays with smart observations about society, all while keeping it light and witty to keep the audience hooked. His plays weren't just for laughs. They were meant to make people think and even change their views on big topics. Shaw aimed to educate through entertainment, using his sharp wit to spotlight and mull over big societal problems. In the UGC NET English exam, recognizing Shaw's use of drama as a tool for social critique is crucial, as it highlights the potential of theater to foster intellectual engagement and societal change. John Ramsay Allardyce Nicholl, born on June 28, 1894 in Scotland, really made a name for himself as a literary scholar and educator. He's best known for his beefy 6-volume History of English Drama 1660 to 1900, started in 1923 and revamped between 1952 and 1959. This massive work, along with his other writings on English drama, hugely boosted the academic field. Nicol was key in bringing Restoration drama, which was often skipped in school due to its racy content and cheeky promiscuity, back into the academic spotlight. His efforts helped change how people saw these plays, integrating them into scholarly studies all through the 20th century. In his 1936 piece, Film and Theater, Nicol dished out some fresh takes on the differences between live theater and film. He suggested that theater is all about imaginative illusion that the audience is in on, while film tends to make viewers see its scenes as real life. Nicol believed that while stage characters usually represent broader types, film actors manage to bring a depth that allows for more nuanced and individual portrayals of people. For the UGC NET English exam, appreciating Nicol's early insights into the unique qualities of theater and film is essential, as it helps understand the evolution of media studies and their theoretical foundations. This theory was even praised by Steve Dixon as being ahead of its time, sort of predicting the postmodern media theories similar to those by John Baudrillard. Moreover, Nicol's work with the Shakespeare Survey from 1948 had a big impact on how Shakespeare is studied. Inspired by the Shakespeare Jahrbuch, he kicked off this yearbook after coming back to England post-WA II, turning it into a top-tier platform for global Shakespeare criticism.